Hello and welcome to AI and Compliance, what CCOs need to know. My name is Leonard DeFranco. I'm the editorial lead here at Hadrias, the agentic compliance infrastructure for financial services firms. What we're going to be covering today is a fairly non-technical overview of essentially a framework that compliance officers can use to understand what AI is and how specifically it's going to help them do their jobs. The reason we're doing this session is because we've had a lot of conversations with compliance officers who feel that there's something intimidating about AI, there's something mysterious, maybe something threatening, and there's just a lot of discourse around what it is. And as someone who works inside of a vendor that is built around AI and someone who uses AI extensively, I think the thing that I often wish is that we could strip away the discourse around AI and focus on the truly transformative power it has as a tool. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on in this session. The theory that we're operating under here in this presentation is that compliance AI is essentially like a team that you employ. And what I want to talk today about is what you need to know to be a good boss of that team. So we're going to cover how to think about AI, what compliance AI is, and how it differs from generative AI, or as I put it here, how something that guesses becomes something you can trust. And then finally, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about basically how you can practice with AI, demystifying it, and making it so that you are aware of what it can do and cannot do. Just a quick stump for Hadrias. We're a agentic compliance infrastructure financial services firms. We're based in New York City, and our product covers the full compliance lifecycle. You can find out more about us at hadrias.com. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about, how to think about AI. What is this? And we all know that ChatGPT and Claude is the computer can talk to you now, but really what is it that's going on? I think the first thing to say is that artificial intelligence it's kind of a loose term. It's been theorized for decades, arguably longer. And it's really only in the last 15 years that, thanks to things like neural networks, and then in 2017, the famous Transformers paper that Google put out, we've been able to actually essentially unify what used to be called like big data. Some of you will remember when that was the next big thing. Processing power met big data and turned into machine learning. And in the last 5 years, um, after the launch of ChatGPT, for example, this technology turned into a very powerful consumer-facing tool. And for the last few years, we've had agents that are much better than the original ones at reasoning. And essentially, I think what's important to understand about artificial intelligence as an evolution of automation is that software can now prompt itself to do things and it can write itself. This is a big difference. In some ways, as we'll talk about, artificial intelligence is kind of simply the progression of automation, and now it can converse with you. But really, the big step change is that it can now create itself and it can task itself to do things. That is very important. But like any technology, it goes through a life cycle. This is obviously the Gartner life cycle, and it applies, I think, very well to the adoption of any kind of technology. And I think right now we're probably still on the ascent up. But as the famous line goes, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. And there are a lot of people who have already massively transformed their workflows with things like Claude Code. AI is a huge part of the work that we do here at Hadrias. We also use it a lot in our work. And so the one thing I want to say about the adoption of AI is that no matter how revelatory it was the first time, me, for example, I saw like a letter written by a computer. I was like, wow, I can't believe this is possible now. But like any technology, it very quickly gets to the point of like what I call the why is this stupid TV not working stage, where it's like you start to get to the point where you discover the technology's limitations, and you want it to, for as revelatory as it was originally, you now want it to do more than it can do. And in the conversation that we're going to have today, I think this is essential to understand that there's very tangible limits to what AI can do. What makes it difficult to understand is that they're always changing. The models are getting better. Things that it wasn't really good at before, it will get good at in the near future. And making predictions about where this is going is really pretty futile, and no one tries to do that. But the principle has to be established. You can sense the limits of AI when you actually work with it. And one of the things that I want to advocate for at the end of the session is that everyone on this call do their own work in getting to know AI and understanding what it can do and what it can't do. So let's get into, I think, some of the mystique around AI. The first question I want to ask is why can't we treat this like a tool? Because in some ways it is just a tool, even if it's kind of an incredible tool. I think the first reason is that it's really kind of challenging our ideas of thinking before they were solid. We have a pretty clear understanding of how anatomy works. We have a pretty clear understanding of how chemistry works and, Newtonian physics. We don't really have a good idea of what knowledge is. What is thinking? What's versus what's calculating? Is there some uh, could some AI get so powerful that it could predict the outcome of like a football game, for example, because there's few enough variables, or is there some kind of inherent limit to how knowable the universe is that super intelligence will discover for us? We don't know these things, and they're raising very interesting questions. And a lot of the discourse around AI is kind of immersed in this. I don't want to call it sci-fi because it is here, and I think there's are important questions to ask. But I do think that we could stand for a little bit of a reality check. It's like, is a calculator good at math? I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that human thinking is vastly different from computer thinking. This is a widely ranging debate, but we know that a calculator is a machine that deterministically is able to do arithmetic better than you can. Does that mean it knows what math is? Does that mean that it's able to think of solve engineering problems better than you? No, well, maybe you, but an engineer, right? And so there's this idea of a global model, which some AI companies are attempting to develop right now. There's this idea that I think intelligence is much more diverse and flexible and global than the current AIs that we have. And so while we are looking at a future where we have super intelligence or powerful AI, as Anthropic calls it, AGI, as some people call it, in many different domains, I think it's important to understand, like, we already have super intelligence in certain much more targeted domains, like doing a calculator, or doing math on a calculator. I have a picture here of an event that some of you will probably recognize. It's, when Garry Kasparov lost to Deep Blue in 1997. It was the first time the best human player in the world lost to a computer. I have a blog about this up on the Hadrias website, but this is an interesting moment in the development of superintelligence, because at the time when this happened, it provoked something of a crisis. There was a lot of people who thought, if a computer is better than a human at chess, what is chess here for, and what are we here for? Is it all over? And what ended up happening was chess became more powerful than ever because of that, precisely because a computer was better than a human. It actually allowed humans to learn easier. It allowed humans to watch grandmaster level games with essentially a scoreboard, because the computer, who's better than either of them, could tell you how good the move was. This was not something that was possible. So this was a domain essentially where superintelligence at its first dawning caused a gigantic crisis of conscience. People didn't know how to think of it. I like in this picture, you see the little American flag next to IBM's computer. We would never think of that nowadays. We would never think of IBM as this is an American playing a Russian. We just think of it as the computer can do this, and it allows humans to do what we like to do better. I think one reason why a lot of this gets obscured is because a lot of the discourse that we see around AI is being driven by, frankly, LLM companies that are selling a speculative thesis. They need the money tap to be turned on. The graph you see right there is showing how much is being spent on data centers, and I'm sure you've heard about this. But some of the companies that are producing the most frontier models, they're fronting this bill, and they need the I'm not going to call it a bubble, but they need the investment to continue. They need the optimism to stay high. And one outcome of that, of being so capital hungry, is that they are really selling a story that, in my opinion, as I say in the reality check, there is veering into religious territory. You see here, in October 2024, Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, published this essay called Machines of Loving Grace, which is I think a fairly measured but outlook on what happens if AI goes right. But it started a lot of hand churning about um, this is going to be the salvation of humanity, and some people think this is going to be the downfall of humanity. And I think the rhetoric is just like a lot of things in our culture, it's just kind of turned up to a point where it's hard to see through it. And just keep in mind when you hear these things that some of these messages are coming from companies that want you to think that this is an inevitable next step of human evolution, right? I do think it's probably pretty similar to something like an industrial revolution, but let's let it be that. We don't have to have it be, we're ascending into some afterlife. If you think about steam power or electricity. That's kind of what I think AI is. And that's sort of the way we're building our product at Hadrias. It is a transformative force like those powers that emerged. And like those powers that emerged, they are most powerful when you build something around them to harness them. So you see on the left here, I have like, this is a horse and a buggy, right? Like it's all analog. And there was when AI first came out, and some of our legacy competitors are still doing this. There's the idea that you could use AI to essentially do the same type of work, right? Um, which is essentially here something I'm not sure I've ever seen this in real life, but it's like a steam engine pulling a carriage, right? You're just doing the same thing but cheaper. The point that I'm making here is what's interesting about steam power is not being able to do the thing you did before better, is being able to build something entirely new around the new power, like the locomotive right there, right? If you were in charge of a transportation company in a horse and buggy era, and all of a sudden you were granted steam power and the locomotive debuted, another technology that required a massive investment of infrastructure that changed the face of the continent, right? You would be able to transport a lot more. The idea of going somewhere would change. The idea of how many people could come with you would change, right? It's not just doing the same thing faster or better. It is truly a step change towards imagining a different way to work. When electricity becomes harnessable. What's interesting is not the electrons moving back and forth. What's interesting is being able to build the thing around it, the transistors that are able to use this force. This is what we mean at Hadrias when we say that we're AI native. It means that it is built from first principles to leverage the powers of AI. I want to talk a little bit about how AI kind of works. I'm not going to go into the technical details of how LLMs train, but basically, I just want to show that there's kind of three stages of developing an AI for a role. Um, on the left, you have a large language model, which is a system that has trained on so much text that it can respond to a prompt by predicting which word comes next. It's raw intelligence, and it knows nothing about any particular firm. This is what you can interact with if you talk to ChatGPT, if you talk to Claude. When you hear that new models are getting better, these models are what is getting better. Like it's essentially kind of a formless power that needs to be put into something in order to be most useful for enterprise use, right? There's training and resourcing, which is another step. And this is essentially giving it access to more specific data, giving it access to your systems. and providing context so that this pattern matching algorithm, which is what a large language model is now able to start matching it to your preferences, to your context. And finally, we have an application layer. This is what Hadrias is. Um, this is software that scaffolds the intelligence and controls what it's prompted to do, what it sees, and where its output goes. Um, the idea is essentially that, as you'll see, when we're working with AI, it's a little bit difficult to talk about this in terms of old style automation. It really is a different kind of agentic automation. And the word agentic, what that means is that this this technology operates like an employee. It's like a team of employees that are helping you do your work. And in order for you to have an employee that helps you at your office, you need to bring them to your office. You need to bring them into your systems. You need to provide them training. A large language model on its own could be brilliant, but it's like a brilliant high school kid or college kid. It's like they don't actually know how to do this job yet. They need to be trained and they need to be given a clear role to play, and their responsibilities need to be calibrated to what they're able to do. And this is essentially the same with AI. And so I have this tag here, compliance AI, on the far right side. This is what Hadrias offers. And this is the core answer to how can something that is good at guessing become suitable for something that has to get it right. So let's talk about that. What is compliance AI? Just to draw this line a little sharper, uh, generative AI needs guardrails, and compliance AI builds the guardrails. It provides those. So generative AI is probabilistic. It guesses. Compliance AI is deterministic. A calculator is deterministic. Deterministic means that you know what you're going to get when it spits something out. Um, AI compliance AI products like Hadrias, we do our best to ensure that everything is transparent and it is a deployment of AI that is conservative as possible. So as opposed to generative AI, where first of all, in neural nets, we often don't really know what's happening. So AI is kind of inherently opaque, but it can be prompted to show its work. And that's what compliance AI is doing. Generative AI is fundamentally creating new things, whereas compliance AI, the way that it's deployed inside the system is essentially only being asked to replicate things that have already been done, right? So it's very conservative. It's audit ready because it's showing its work, and it's all of it is serving up to human judgment, which is, of course, right now, and probably for the future that we can envision, the only intelligence capable of actually doing compliance. A human judge needs an AI assistant, and what the AI can do is provide all the context, but the human has to remain in charge. And this is what Hadrias is. It's compliance infrastructure built from first principles to leverage the power of AI. These are our 6 modules, and we are essentially a system that is always looking for new ways to use the powers of AI as we understand them to do the work that compliance has to have done. Because as we know, compliance is a job function that has a lot of repetitive things, reading, flagging, communicating that AI could be doing and freeing up your time. Um, to make a bold prediction, I think that as the AI rollout of AI goes in RegTech, our sector, that's how it will go everywhere else. And the reason I say that is because RegTech serves a compliance function that needs to get it right. Because there's this stricture on the nature of compliance work, that it has to be audit ready, that it has to be correct, that it has to stand up to scrutiny. This puts essentially a crucible around AI deployment that I think is going to be predictive of how AI is going to be able to transform everything else in the economy. At the same time, AI has a very real role to play here because of what I just mentioned. So much of this work is repetitive. It's something that you wish could be automated, and essentially now it can be. So let's talk about what AI can do and what it can't do. And this is at the core of how we build our product. So and understanding these limitations is really something that for any CCOs on this call, getting to know very intimately what it's good at and what you don't quite trust it at is essential to being able to use this as a tool. So it's good at reading it's good at reading a lot of text, which again is great for compliance. You have compliance manuals, you have a lot of emails to review. I personally don't think it's good at writing. Obviously, it can write, but generally, you don't want it to be interfacing with humans. It's okay if a chatbot is answering a quick question. We have that in Hadrias. But if you're doing work where you need to chase down someone for an attestation or something, and you really want to it has to be a delicate political conversation or something, this is best done as a human. You have more context for it. AI is good at finding patterns, but it's not as good at judgment. It's not smart enough. I mean, everyone on this call is smarter than Claude, right? Uh, there's risk tolerances, things like that. There's a lot of other factors that fall into judgment that I'm sure we all agree. Even something that can find patterns very well mathematically, we wouldn't trust it to do that. AI is really great at research. It's really great at serving your intelligence, right? Uh, I use AI for research all the time. It's an amazing thought partner. Um, it's actually good at fact checking too, if it can link to external sources that are authoritative. It's not the best at factual accuracy. We don't trust it to get something right. AI hallucinates. And so this then goes into how we've built Hadrias. So like in Hadrias, because we're trying to use what it's good at and eliminate what it's bad at or solve for what it's bad at, what it will do is it'll flag passages for review in your compliance manual, for example. It will flag let's say, if you set a particular preference in your communications review module, maybe an email that a rep sent out gets flagged, it will show why it's doing it and what rule that violation attaches to. So it's not making any assumptions. In Hadrias, in compliance AI, it knows that it has to show you all of its work because you are the one that's deciding if it did it right. And then I just mentioned it actually suggests fact checks, but fact checking is okay as long as it can cite its sources, right? Here's just a little bit of I'll show you three examples of how we do this in our product. So our marketing module, for example, it can read for context, not just keyword matches, right? So this is one of the things this is one of the examples of being AI native. So there are some competitors of ours that say that their AI products or their products use AI, and they do, but like what they will do is uh, read uh, read a piece of marketing or communications for matches with lexicons, and then if any of the words that are on the no-no list are flagged, then it will throw a false positive, and then they'll use AI after that to clean up that and reduce the false positives. AI native is actually having just AI read it from top to bottom as a first step. And not only does it reduce false positives, but it actually increases true positives because there might be something that that is phrased a different way that would actually be permitted by a lexicon system. So AI is great at reading and parsing, and so we use it in a function here that requires a lot of reading and parsing. Just another example is our branches module. It proposes risks, controls, and tests for every section of your compliance manual. Compliance manuals are long, they are dense, and AI is good at reading lots of long, dense text. And so what this module does is it actually will pull out pieces of your compliance manual, and then it's challenged to invent the test that a CCO would create to prove that this control works, right? And then it proposes those tests to you, and it always links back to the text. And the final example I'll show you from the Hadrias product is this idea of interconnectedness. So a big part of being AI native is not only being able to deploy AI in these different settings, but also being a system of record that unsilos data and puts it into a repository where an agent can go and do better work. AI agents live and breathe context. They do better with context. The more they can see from more different sources, the more powerful they'll be. So in this example here, I'm calling out, these are actually different modules of Hadrias, but let's say that there was a trade executed that appeared to violate or I have here preceded by issue or contact, right? So what it can do then is the agent can go then automatically check, well, let me see what the data says about our communications monitoring. Oh, he got an email from that CFO. Let's take a look at this employee's U4, which lives in a different module. Ooh, there's maybe something worrying there. Connecting these dots allows AI to be much more powerful. And this is something that it makes it much easier to compile a complete audit trail. And this is really what we mean when we say agentic compliance. So, agentic compliance is essentially the work of compliance performed by a team of AI agents that report to a human. It's essentially compliance automation to the degree that compliance automation is possible. And agents need data, and putting all the data in one spot is what we're trying to do. And I'll go to the last section here. I wanted to include a few pro tips and concepts to keep in mind as you gain comfort with AI. An agent is like any employee. What you trust it with determines the work you give it. So if you have an employee, you'd want to understand, sure, they're smart. AI, the models are very smart, but what can it not do? Where does it start to break down? And where can it help you? Um, Keep in mind that these are changing all the time. So what your job is to stay current with what it can't do. I think that's the principle I'm trying to articulate. Once you do that, a lot of the hype goes away, a lot of the fear goes away, a lot of the mistrust goes away, and you start to be able to simply see possibilities with this amazing new technology. So, one thing you can do to start practicing with AI is parse lots of text. Um, a really great use of it is to generate meeting notes. We use Granola. There's many different note-taking apps. See if it can automatically transcribe what is said in the meeting, and then it can automatically generate a summary of the meeting, action items for later, things like that. Any text that you have a lot of, you can is good to run through AI and help you understand it. Use AI as a thought partner. We all, I think, have probably experienced write this email more politely, give me this now. Can you please phrase this more politely? But try to have it go a little bit further. If there's a issue at work, if there's an issue at home, whatever, if there's a maybe a regulatory challenge, an unclarity with some rule, give it to AI, and it can't hurt seeing what it provides. See how good its reasoning is. Its reasoning is generally pretty good. What I have personally found from generative AI, from dealing with Claude specifically, is it's very sycophantic, and so I wouldn't trust it to push back on me as much as I would trust, for example, a domain matter expert if I were to say something that was kind of not getting the gist right. So I know that it's able to help me do that, but I don't trust everything it says. Build something that you want to exist that doesn't exist. They call this vibe coding. One of the biggest transformations that AI has already had is with coding, because coding is a fairly domain tightened field. And so the idea that now engineers are kind of more architects of software than like typists of software has been revolutionary. And this might be a little bit far afield for some people, but because it still has a learning curve to it, frankly, like using Claude Code, for example, to build an app. But give it a shot. See what it can do. Chances are you will be able to build something that you wanted to exist that didn't exist, just by typing regular English into the system. Um, Keep in mind that you have to keep training it. AI is a pattern recognition. LLMs, I should say more specifically, are pattern recognition models, and they require a lot of feedback. They do improve with feedback, and if AI is not giving you the outputs you want, chances are you can train it if you continually give it feedback. If you ask it to generate an image or anything you ask it to do, if it's not exactly right, tell it. Keep going back and telling it, and then see if you can. If you use Claude, for example, one of the things that they've done really well is productize the idea of having memory that shares across different projects and things like that. So you have to keep working with AI. Don't just whatever it spits out at first is not the totality of what it can do. it's guessing at what you want. So you got to keep telling it. Uh, Ask AI how you can use AI. One of the best prompting tips that's out there is ask AI, how would you like me to get you to do this? Or you could give it a finished product and say, what would I have to ask you to do for you to create this? AI is very good at telling you how it operates. And finally, this is, I think, one of the main themes I've been talking about today. Just beware of its limits. Um, Certainly, when you put sensitive data into an LLM, that is not secure, so don't do it. Um, don't trust what it says. It hallucinates. It's an algorithm trying to guess the most probable next word, and it's just very prone to hallucination. So the point of all of this is to be in touch with those limits and then know what you can trust it with. So we're getting to the end here. And th this is the point. Like it is a tool, but it's a new generation tool. It's not a machine of loving grace. I mean, I don't think so at least. But it is going from horse and buggy to locomotive. It's going from you know, walking to a horse, whatever modality change you want to say, like it changes the possibilities of what you can do. And so we have to stay on top of it, but we have to understand it. It's a transformative new technology that basically now software can kind of assign itself things to do, and you can be in charge of it as it works. Don't get blinded by the hype. This is agentic work is very much within your ambit, and it is going to help compliance do this work better. And finally, the idea that compliance AI is not ChatGPT, it's not Claude, it's not a chatbot. Compliance AI is an application layer that sits atop of trained firm-specific model that is itself a version of a general intelligence model. And it is purpose-built to be trusted with data. We have a zero data retention policy, so we don't hand any of your data back to the vendors of the models that Hadrias uses. But within Hadrias, your data does sit there securely, and it can help the system train itself to become more performative to what your preferences are. And compliance AI turns this guessing algorithm into something you can trust. It harnesses that just like the engine harnesses steam power, just like an internal combustion engine harnesses gasoline's propensity to explode. A couple points here to close out. Compliance is not the only ones that have AI. You could see this and decide that AI is just simply not for you. That's fine. But you have to be aware that on both sides of compliance, these tools exist. Reps and advisors have them, and that means that there's far more marketing emails being sent out that are far more personalized. There's more text that possibly no one has even seen that's being sent out as marketing. AI is being used by the people that you have to provide oversight to. At the same time, the SEC has it too. They know that these tools are out there. There's this idea of the era of total review that we talk about here at Hadrias, which is basically that sampling is no longer going to get you through an audit examination. The SEC has been very bullish on AI. They've been very permissive of AI's rollout. If you look at the exam priorities, they actually mostly talk about their concern rather than overuse of AI is that there's good governance of AI. And surprisingly, that if a firm claims to use AI, that they actually have to be using real AI. They don't want it to be, it's a mechanical clerk that's just a human pretending to be AI to sound cool. But they have these tools too. And so they know that you can read every one of these emails, and there's more emails now to read, right? There's more marketing to read. So this is the problem. Like we're in a sandwich, and so compliance has to have compliance AI. But I think the last thing I want to close with is that this is a good thing for compliance. AI is a good development for compliance. It's about to get more important. When a job function can accomplish more with more powerful tools, they grow in headcount, earn a better seat at the table, and take on more valuable work. This picture you see here is it's Jack Lemmon from a movie, but this is what a spreadsheet used to look like. I got this from a Benedict Evans blog post a couple years ago. That man right there, that actuary, is actually what a cell of Excel does now, right? They would spend their entire day in a room full of identical people using an adding machine to make calculations, and then they would pass it along to their colleague. That's essentially what how a spreadsheet works. Now, if you showed this guy Excel, he'd be like, I'm out of a job. And he probably would have to change his job. But the job of accountancy didn't go away. Radiology didn't go away. Radiology was a field that a decade ago they thought, oh, well, this is the most exposed to AI. And actually, there's more radiologists needed now than before. Engineers, there's actually new demand for engineers when everyone thought that Claude Code was going to be doing away with them. So compliance is about to get more important. We like to talk about compliance being the owner of firm integrity, the way that the SEC is the owner of systemic integrity, but they don't do that. They don't ensure systemic integrity by going into every firm all the time. They establish guidelines and they operationalize this rule following so that they can essentially ensure that the entire thing is healthy. And our thought is that this is what compliance is going to become. There's a lot of things about brand reputation, about firm health that can be taken on once some of the stuff that can be automated away is automated away. And with that, I will stop talking and let's see if we have any questions. We got a couple. What models does Hadrias use and how do you switch between them? Um, We use the frontier models. The switch between them is a good question. I'm not sure. I can take that back to our team. Um, but that's a good question. Let's see. AI has a fail rate. What is Hadrias AI's fail rate? Um, I guess you could, I guess you could say that our fail rate is a proxy for that would probably be, I'm not sure what you mean by fail rate, but we have a concept of in our product, 99.12 or something, higher than 99% of flags are not dismissed. So there's fewer than 1% false positives in Hadrias. In other words, fewer than 1% of the flags that the AI raises are dismissed as not of concern. Or incorrect. So I would say that's probably a proxy for our fail rate. But again, the structure of the product is intentionally designed so that that's not it's never the last word. It's always submitting something to the human for review. So theoretically, the fail rate should be zero because all of it is just presenting evidence and audit trails to human reviewers. Let's see. Okay, you compare AI to railroads, which required a lot of infrastructure. What is the infrastructure for us? It's exactly the same. I think I mentioned it in the session. There is an enormous a generation of capital is being deployed to build out the infrastructure for AI. They're talking about putting data centers on the moon. I I and Hadrius do not take a stand on that, but this is definitely a big area of focus. There's a lot of infrastructure that's required for it. And hopefully the results are to connect us together better. If you're saying AI is mostly hype, why are experts calling it the new nuclear arms race? I am not saying it's mostly hype. I'm saying that the hype train has a tendency to run away from from reality sometimes. And no, AI is an enormously transformative technology. There is very little work that's going to look the way that it did 5 years ago, 5 years from now. And I think that this will be a good thing. And I think that it's something that will ultimately empower the humans that are currently in charge of it. And thank you all for joining us. This has been AI and Compliance, what CCOs need to know. Be sure to follow Hadrias on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in seeing more of Hadrias, please let us know. We'll catch you next time.